I can't believe that it's actually season 3. I mean, the time has gone by so fast.
That's unreal.
We
3
actually
seasons.
kind of, missed kind of the thick of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, which was something that
Yeah.
obviously you would have had a lot of opining to do on. But there's 3 trials going on right now that are, I don't know, kind of high profile, but they don't seem to be getting a ton of media attention. We've got Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. We've got, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell. That's probably the biggest one, and then of course there's Jussie Smollett. And these are all happening simultaneously. Let's dig into these. And it's kind of cool because you can kind of, look at this from actually both sides, both from the prosecution side and the defense side.
When I started my career after law school, I was a public defender for many years, and then I became a federal prosecutor. And I actually ended up trying 60 criminal jury trials to verdict, which is probably more than most people try in a lifetime. And I was fortunate to do that work for almost a decade. And so a lot of experience, not just in federal court, but also state court. And so we're talking about cases today that are in state and federal court. The Rittenhouse case was in state court. We won't spend much time, if any, on that, but the Smollett case is over in state court. I also think for like media purposes, growing up, I remember, I was in high school when the OJ verdict was handed down. And in terms of like a case of that kind of magnitude, I think Rittenhouse probably equaled it or got close to equaling it. Everybody followed the Rittenhouse case. And usually you get one case every now and then that piques, the national interest. I think these 3 cases do pique the national interest. I just think it's very unusual for them literally to be going on as we speak simultaneously from coast to coast. So I'm pretty excited to talk about these 3 cases and maybe guess where they're going to go.
Well, so okay, let's start here. What is the situation with the Elizabeth Holmes? Like, what are the charges?
Yeah, so that case has been building for quite some time. I mean, they've already made documentaries out of this and movies out of this, and she hasn't even been to trial yet. And her trial has been going on for weeks in the West Coast, I think in Northern California. She's federally indicted along with a co-defendant who will be tried separately, her former business partner. And she's indicted with about 8 counts, if I'm not mistaken, 2 conspiracy counts and 4 to 6 what we call substantive counts of actual wire fraud. And all that means, wire fraud, is fancy speak for you use the banking system or the postal system to commit a fraud of some kind. And that's what's alleged in her indictment. And she, I think, has been in trial for a few weeks. She just took the stand for a couple of days, and now I think the federal prosecutors are finally cross-examining her, which is a really rare thing in a federal case to begin with. In a criminal case, for the defendant to take the witness stand in their own defense, because as you know, and as all our viewers know, they don't have to, and it can't be held against them. But she took the very unusual step, like Kyle Rittenhouse did, to speak in her own defense. And sometimes that works. In my experience, most of the time that does not work. And we rarely put up defendants in criminal cases to testify for a variety of reasons. But the fraud, we can get into some of the details of the fraud.
But let's deflect just for a moment to the Kyle Rittenhouse. It was unusual that Kyle Rittenhouse was put on the stand, but it seemed to work in their favor to do that.
Well, look, having represented so many criminal defendants in state and federal court, that defense attorney knew exactly what his client was going to testify to, and he knew he had the facts on the side of his client to testify. Because a lot of times you don't. I mean, as a public defender, I knew that the facts were kind of tough to argue, and I didn't want to subject my client to cross-examination by a federal prosecutor, which is all right. Kyle had to tell his story, right? His case was so politicized, so much in the media. Everybody was talking about, not just in America. I had family overseas calling me about the Kyle Rittenhouse case. That's how much attention this got. And so his defense attorney took the very unusual case in probably the highest profile case we've seen in modern judicial history. And it worked because he knew how his client would perform. And I think what the people saw during his testimony was Kyle's version of what happened, and the jury believed him.
Oh, fascinating. So I guess is this the same play here? I mean,
I don't
is
think
it really?
so.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest, I think I've been following the Theranos, the Holmes case out in California. She's taken the witness stand. So what happens is the defense puts up the defendant. The defense directs that testimony. Her testimony by the defense took about 2 to 3 days, and then the federal prosecutors get a chance to cross-examine her or to question her testimony. And the sum and substance of her testimony is she's basically saying, she made some mistakes while she was CEO of Theranos, the blood machine company. And she's saying that due to an abusive relationship she was in with her co-defendant, who's being tried separately, she also alleged that she had been, raped and some pretty harsh and terrible things. She's saying these things, they become quote unquote evidence in the case, but it's for the jury to decide whether or not it's true. Because as I follow the case, there aren't any other substantive evidence they've put on so far to substantiate those claims besides her testimony, right? So it's very difficult in this case to prove that. In Kyle's case, there was a video, right? The jury saw the video. There was a drone feed. There was witnesses who testified to the opposite of what the prosecution thought they were going to say. The witnesses in the Kyle Rittenhouse case said, the victim said, we did go after Kyle. That creates a lot of evidence in the favor of Kyle. Here, in the Theranos case, in the Holmes case, I'm not sure what witnesses they're going to call. The defense, that is going to get to call to substantiate her allegations. So it's a very, very hard road to hoe there for her. But I do think, as a former defense attorney, she is a female, and she was a young, successful businesswoman, and I think the jury likes to see that sometimes. And what they, I think, are going for is that she was overcome by other people in her sphere so that she should not be held criminally liable for the fraud charges that she's been charged with. It's a strategy. It's a defense strategy that people use all the time. And that's the one they're exhibiting in the Holmes case right now.
Well, and from what I understand, Sunny Balawi, I believe that's I guess, who worked for her, kind of a business partner. So he's apparently denying everything she's saying about him.
Well, so he can't yet in trial. So what happens is it's a co-defendant case, meaning the two of them were charged together, Sunny and Elizabeth Holmes, and they were supposed to be tried together. But the judge, rightfully so, I think, split the cases. He said, we'll do one trial and then we'll do the next trial, because the defense probably told them in proceedings that weren't privy to the public at the time, we, the defense in the Holmes case, are going to blame this person. So we can't be tried together. It's a decision for the judge to make and for the prosecution and defense attorneys to argue for. And I think it's the right decision in this case. So while it's been said in the media that Sunny is denying those charges, he's not going to be a witness in this case for sure. So that information that it was Sunny who is forcing her to do X, Y, or Z has to come in through another witness or another piece of evidence, documentary evidence or video evidence. And so maybe they have it. I don't know. They're still going.
No, it's fascinating. And so, but ultimately, right, she was in charge. And so that's, I guess, that's going to be the prosecution's sort of key.
Well, I think if you just look at some of the witnesses that the prosecution presented during its case in chief, right? You're talking about former secretaries of defense, some of the most powerful and successful businessmen and women in America. She funded it to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. She was meeting with these very notable people throughout America in government and private sector and getting checks for millions and millions of dollars. That's what business people do. The problem that the prosecution has alleged in this case is that it's not that she had a business idea, tried it, and it just failed, like what happens to so many people. That's not criminal. What they're saying is that her business idea, the blood machine, she lied about it. That's what the prosecutors are saying. They're saying she knew that the machine and the technology did not work, but she went to investors anyway and said, no, we have this amazing machine. You need a drop of blood, and it gives you all this feedback on data, on biology, on testing, on health. And in theory, sounds amazing if you can have a machine that's about the size of a toaster oven do that. But the prosecutor's saying, no, she knew the whole time that it was a fraud, which is why they're charging her with fraud in this case. And I think she's looking at a maximum of maybe 20 odd years in federal prison. But what happens in a fraud case, especially in federal court, is if she's convicted, the sentence is largely determined by the scale of the fraud, the amount of money. There's these things called the United States Sentencing Guidelines. It's basically everybody that's convicted in federal court, the judge and the prosecutor and the defense attorney look at these sentencing guidelines and they formulate basically a chart that says this is the range of your sentence. But there's a lot of factors to that range. In fraud cases, it's almost solely based on money. So the more money, the bigger the fraud amount, the more prison time she's facing. And $100 million plus is a substantial fraud amount.
Right. So, ultimately, if there's reasonable doubt that she knew it was a fraud, she may get off.
If the jury believes that, yeah. But there's multiple counts here, and federal cases, generally when they go to jury trial, over 90% of the time, the federal prosecutors achieve a conviction. So it's not impossible, but it's very difficult, and she's charged with multiple counts. So a lot of times what juries do, and I've seen them firsthand do it in my cases, is they split it. And they say, well, we're not sure what she did, so we're going to acquit her of these counts, but we're going to find her guilty of this count or that count.